Well, hey, friends, welcome to Q on Q. Man, it is good to be back with all of you. It has been quite a long time since we have been together. There's just been so much going on in life. The last time we were together at the end of season 5, it was late summertime, and we were just starting to wrap up our summer vacation and get ready for school. A lot has happened since then over the past few months. Obviously, school's back in session, and summer's over, and fall is almost over by this point. It seems like we are heading into winter here in the Northeast US. So much has happened with us in our lives. Let's see where to begin. My daughter, who is also a teacher, got her first full time job. We are so excited for her. She's teaching elementary music, and she has been loving every minute of it so far. Let's see, our son is close to wrapping up his third semester in college and making a name for himself on campus in a good way. He's involved in everything he can get himself into. My wife is back for another year working in our church preschool, maybe in a little more prominent role this year. She's loving those little kids. And I'm a little over a fourth of the year through year 28 of teaching music. We have a new schedule this year, which is sometimes difficult for a veteran like me to get used to, but even with a little bit of adjusting, I'm really enjoying the topics that I have been getting to cover this year. The biggest news for me personally probably happened in just the last few weeks. I had a little bit of an accident, I guess you could say. I slipped and fell down a flight of stairs, and I broke a few vertebrae in my back. The first 24 hours after the fall was pretty scary. The pain, the initial shock, the initial diagnosis from the doctors, and the numerous interactions with all the people in the ER and trauma and neuro. But I am so happy to say that for the type of accident that I had, the doctors say I was pretty lucky. I say I was blessed and covered and protected. But the doctor said 1 inch any direction could have been something much, much more serious. But for now, I'm recuperating. I took a few days off of work to rest up and have taken some scatter days here and there as I felt needed to with my new back brace as my friend. And I appreciate your prayers as I keep on going through the healing process. I will revisit the doctors here in about a month and get some stuff reevaluated. But for right now, I am just feeling so blessed that my incident could have been so much worse. And I'm just so glad to be back with you in the condition that I'm in. All right, so this is the first episode of season 6, and it's episode 96 overall for us, which means we are coming up to our 100th episode. I can hardly believe we are about to hit that milestone. It seems like just yesterday I was feeling a tug to start this podcast, and what started with a few local listeners a week is now heard literally around the world. Thank you for your support. I'm so grateful for the words that I feel have been laid upon my heart to share with you. It's never too late for you to share these episodes with others. If you know somebody who you think would love a little dose of Q on Q, why not encourage them to tune in? We're believing that this season will be our best and most listened to yet. So thank you. Today's episode is the first in a new 4-part series we're going to be doing leading up to our 100th episode. It's something that's been weighing on me for some time now, and that is the idea of seasons in our lives. We all move through seasons in life, times of growth, times of challenge, times of change, and times of joy. Just like the natural seasonal cycles of winter, spring, summer, and autumn, our lives follow a similar rhythm. Some seasons invite us to slow down, some push us forward, and some reshape us in ways we never expected. And whether we recognize it or not, every season holds a purpose. Each one offers something we need in order to become who God created us to be. So, in this 4-episode series to kick off season 6, we're going to take a realistic and spiritually grounded look at these seasons: the waiting of winter, the renewal of spring, the abundance of summer, and the transition of autumn. My hope is that as we explore each one, you will recognize your own season, past or present, and find encouragement in knowing that none of us journey through these rhythms alone. Every season teaches, every season allows us to grow, and every season prepares us for the one that comes next. So today, we're beginning where many of us find ourselves more often than we'd like. And that is in the season that is just around the corner, or for where I live, feeling it outside right now. That is winter, a season of waiting, the season of stillness, the season where it can feel like nothing is happening, even when everything is happening beneath the surface. When we think of winter, especially where I live in the US Northeast, we often picture cold, stillness, silence. It's a season where everything appears dormant and the world feels quieter than usual. The trees are bare, the daylight is shorter, outside activity seems to slow down. And in our lives, we experience seasons that feel exactly the same. The moments when progress seems frozen and we're unsure what God is doing or where we are headed. We just had a patio installed at our house in the last few months, and when the contractor put in the plants, I noticed there were flowers. They only lasted a few days, and I made a comment that, boy, we just put these in and now they're dead. And he gave me an interesting word that made me think a lot in preparation for this podcast. He said that the flowers weren't dead, the flowers were dormant, and they would come back full of life in the spring. That reminded me that winter isn't a dead season. In fact, it's often one of the most necessary seasons that we walk through. Beneath the surface, growth is happening in ways that we just can't see, preparing us for what comes next. Winter invites us to slow down. It calls us to reflect, and it begs us to trust that the stillness is not wasted. It's sacred space for God's unseen work. Let's be honest for a minute. Winter, in the rhythm of our lives, is often the season that makes us the most uncomfortable. Why? Well, it's the time when the things we usually rely on for momentum feel like they've gone quiet. It's when we enter a season where we feel that productivity, clarity, even energy just to get through the day are no longer right in front of us. You might be praying for direction and hearing nothing specific. You might be pushing forward on something important and yet sensing no movement at all. Or maybe you're holding on to a hope or a dream that's feeling like it's drifting further away instead of coming closer. Winter has a way of stripping things down to their simplest form, leaving us with questions that we just can't easily answer. These seasons of waiting challenge us because they confront our desire for control. We want timelines, outcomes, signs of progress, but winter doesn't always offer those. Instead, it slows us down to a pace that we don't always choose. It asks us to sit with uncertainty rather than rush past something. And it's in that slower pace that winter begins in the stillness, the quiet, the in between. Winter isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's a season that forces us to pause long enough to notice what's really going on in our hearts. But how do we get through when everything looks barren from the outside? In other seasons of life, it's easier to track growth or see God's hand at work. In spring, things bloom. In summer, things seem to flourish. And in autumn, things change. But winter hides its progress. It's a season where God often works beneath the surface in places we don't see and places we might not understand until much later. That hiddenness can make us restless or anxious, but it's also where some of the deepest, most transformational work happens. When we begin to see winter not as a halt, but as a reset, the season takes on a different meaning. It becomes almost an invitation to breathe, to listen more closely, to allow God to strengthen parts of us that may not get attention in busier times. Winter's a season where we learn patience, humility, trust. It's a season that reminds us we are not defined by constant activity, because sometimes the most important growth happens when we stop striving and simply remain faithful in the quiet. Winter often becomes a season where our faith is tested in ways it isn't in other parts of life. When everything feels quiet, when prayers seem to echo without clear answers, when progress seems to be invisible, that's where the deeper questions rise to the surface. We ask, is God listening? Is He working in my life? Is there a real purpose in what I'm doing? Should I keep praying? Scripture says yes, but winter asks whether we're willing to trust that truth even when we don't have visible proof. It's one thing to trust God when the path is bright and clear, it's another to trust Him when everything looks cold and still. This is why waiting in Scripture is never really described as passive. I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but it's not the kind of waiting where you sit on a bench and hope something eventually happens. It's more like a posture, a choice to remain grounded, steady, open to God's timing and direction. I want to read to you Isaiah 40:31. The NLT version puts it this way: but those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. I feel like that verse gets used on its own an awful lot. And while it's standing strong alone, I want to read it again with a little bit before it to give you the full meaning here. I'm going to start in the middle of verse 28. The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Some translations use the term those that wait upon the Lord. You could say those who expect, those who have hope, those who look for Him. We are reminded that those who wait on the Lord actually find their strength renewed, not depleted. That period of what seems like decimation is actually a period of renewal. That period of transition is really a period of preparation for what's next. Winter isn't about holding on, it's about being strengthened in ways we don't always recognize right while we're in the middle of it. Stillness can feel like the hardest part of winter because so many of us are used to equating movement with progress. When things slow down or they even stop altogether sometimes, our instinct is just to push harder or fill that silence with noise. But we are called numerous times to just be still. I want to reshape your thinking a little when I say this. Stillness is not inactivity. It's a shift in where we place our trust. It's choosing to believe that God is present and working even when our circumstances feel stalled. During winter, trees that look barren on the outside are growing stronger root systems underneath. Their energy shifts from an outward expression to inward development. They're not producing fruit, and they're certainly not growing new leaves, but they're anchoring themselves. They're getting ready for the seasons ahead. In the same way, winter seasons in our lives often deepen the parts of us that no one else sees. Maybe it's our character, or our resilience, or our dependence on God, even our clarity about what truly matters. The soil, too, rests during winter. Farmers know that constant harvesting and replanting without a pause will eventually exhaust the ground, and winter restores it, replenishing nutrients and resetting what has been depleted. Sometimes the winter seasons of our lives arrive after periods of busyness, overcommitment, or emotional strain. And they come not to punish us, but to give us space to recover what we may have lost along the way. Even in the animal world, many creatures conserve energy, slow their rhythms, or find shelter during winter. They're not giving up when they do that, they're preserving strength for the right moment. Think about that image for a moment, the animal preserving its strength for just the right moment. It's a reminder that winter doesn't demand that we perform or produce. It's asking us to protect what matters, to return to simple, steady faithfulness, and to honor our limits. Winter gives us permission to breathe differently. Several years ago, I found myself needing to step away from many of the things that had felt normal to me: work, relationships, personal connections, all because, to be very honest, somebody else had an agenda that disrupted my life. And at first, I felt attacked, and all I wanted to do was fight back, to resist, to push against what was happening. But eventually, I realized this season had its own process that needed to be honored. So I prayed and I waited, no matter how hard it was, and I trusted and I leaned into the rhythms that I still had access to, even in the quiet. Those routines that I could cling to, that could keep me going. What I discovered in all of that was surprising. There was stillness, but there were new opportunities that began to emerge. Things I hadn't known I needed or even wanted at the time. I started publishing music, composing more consistently, and even launching the infancy of this podcast. That winter season, which at first felt disruptive and painful, ended up being a time of preparation, creativity, and growth that I wouldn't have experienced otherwise if it hadn't been for all I went through. It reminded me that even when life feels frozen or uncertain, or even when you're experiencing pain, God is at work beneath the surface, shaping, strengthening, and guiding us toward what's next. When you begin to recognize that winter has its own purpose, the season becomes less threatening. Instead of seeing the stillness as an interruption, you begin to see it as preparation. Because under the surface, in places nobody applauds and nobody sees, God is shaping you for what's next. Winter is where roots grow. Winter is where foundations deepen. Winter is where faith becomes more than a feeling and turns into something solid. And when spring finally comes, what emerges is stronger because of what winter built. Even when life feels paused, there's a quiet invitation in the winter season to pay attention to the small, often overlooked moments. Maybe it's a conversation that shifts your perspective, a sermon that makes you think, a book that plants a new idea, maybe a simple habit that strengthens your day to day rhythm. These small seeds, planted quietly during a season of waiting, often grow into the things that define us most deeply. The challenge is learning to notice them, to nurture them, and to trust that they matter, even when the larger world seems frozen. And the hard realization is that this season really causes us to confront ourselves in ways that other seasons rarely do. It strips away distractions, it forces us to reflect, and it brings questions to the surface we might otherwise ignore. The answers to these questions might not arrive quickly, but the act of asking, of leaning into the stillness, begins to transform us from the inside out. Who am I becoming in this quiet? Where's my focus, my trust, my hope being anchored? And perhaps most importantly, how can I surrender what I can't control while still moving forward in faith? If you find yourself in a season of waiting today, I want to encourage you. Encourage you to fight back the urge to rush or resist it. And I'm not saying to sit back and just take whatever's coming at you, but instead allow yourself to sit with tension. And I know that's hard to hear, but sit with the tension, no matter how hard it may be. Sit with the uncertainty and sit with the silence. Importantly, with this is that you pray honestly, that you reflect deeply, and let life that you still have access to guide you. Feed off of your prayers, feed off of the strength. The things that feel dormant now are preparing you to bloom later. The lessons you are learning quietly are setting a foundation for strength, for wisdom, and opportunities that will surprise you. And my friends, when spring comes, it won't feel like a sudden shift. It'll feel like a slow unveiling of everything that's been growing beneath the surface. Winter's not just a season to endure, it's a season to be fully present in, to honor, and to allow God to work in ways we may never fully see until we look back. The waiting, the quiet, and the preparation of winter don't end without purpose. They set the stage for renewal, fresh opportunities, and the blossoming of things we've nurtured beneath the surface. So next time, we'll step into that season of spring, a time when hope breaks through, creativity and energy return, and God begins to reveal the fruits of patience and faith. It's the season where what once felt dormant starts to thrive, and where the possibilities of life and purpose feel renewed in ways we could not have imagined during the stillness of winter. Until then, bundle up, but don't stay hidden. Get ready for what will be blooming next time. That's all for this week's Q on Q. As always, I really do appreciate you tuning in this week. And we will see you back here next time when we'll have more for you on Q.